What's up, guys? Elysian Castaic here, and we are in Blender. We're going to be working on a little bit of a project today. Had a couple of people asking me certain things, and I was noting some repetition, so decided to make this video to make it a little bit easier. Just a simple tutorial. Just going to make like a little short sword dagger type thing today. Very low poly, just to get some simple info in. This is what your basic startup scene will look like. It's a cube with a little point light and a camera in the thing. This commentary is dubbed, by the way. When I made the video, for some reason my mic was not recording. Here I'm showing you that I'm in Cycles Render. It's just what I prefer to use. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. But in the next couple of videos, I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff with the material nodes and things, and those only show up in Cycles Render. So if you want to be following along with the tutorial, make sure you're in Cycles Render, just so that you have access to this tab here, the Materials tab, and you're able to follow along with me. Now, there are other tutorials out there that you can use to learn Blender Render, but for whatever reason, it's just really confusing to me. So we're going to be using the default cube here, and these are the objects that come with your default scene. You can go ahead and just delete the lamp with X, and in a moment here I'm going to realize that my screencast keys are not on. But we're going to be using this cube here. I'm not entirely sure what I'm talking about at the moment. Again, dubbed commentary is kind of hard to follow along with. Trying to remember exactly what I've been talking about. Yes, that's always the issue. Now, one thing to note, I am doing this entire video left-handed. I am a right-handed person. Why am I putting this particular handicap on myself? It's because I am in a splint. Yes. Now, I'm showing you here the different viewpoints. If you hit numpad 5, you switch between your typical view to orthographic view, which is a lot more precise, a bit more angular, and really allows you to have more control over your viewport. And numpad 1 to go in the front view, and it brings up this grid pattern when you're in orthographic. Now I'm showing you in tab. By pressing the tab button, you get access to all of your vertices, which are these little dots here at the corners. Back to front view with numpad 1, and I'm showing you by pressing G and Z and holding control, you can drag it up to that baseline there, which is where we want that little orange dot that you could see. That's the origin point. I'm telling you about that now. Every object has its own origin point, and by having it at the base of this cube, we can control which direction things get scaled at. So I'm trying to show you that by deselecting it, you can still see the origin point, but when you select another object, you see its origin point. This is very handy for lining certain things up in your viewports. Now back into here, you can see that I'm scaling it on Z, and now it's only going in one direction because the origin is at the base of the object. If it were in the center of the cube, it would be scaling in both directions, which can be a pain in the butt sometimes. So let's see, now we're in top view, and I finally realized that my screencast is off. So now you can see the little mouse icon down in the bottom left, and you can see which buttons I'm pressing. You bring up that little menu on the side by pressing N, and now whenever I'm pressing something, you can see what I'm using down there in the bottom left. So if you're having trouble keeping up, just keep your eyes on that, and you'll see which buttons that I'm using. Now we're going to rotate this 45. You can, when you hit R and then Z on the up and down axis, you can hit 4, 5 on the numpad to rotate it. And now I'm showing you here, I'm going to turn off this limit selection option here, and when you rotate your view, you can now see all the faces, edges, and vertices behind what you can normally see. It gives you a very rough wireframe of what's going on behind there. Then press C to get the circle selection option. It's very handy for precise selection. I prefer it over using the B for box select, which I'm going to show you here in a second. B, and then click and drag And that's very useful. You can select an entire object that way, a whole side and stuff, but the circle select is very useful for just going along and selecting very certain amount of vertices that there are. Now if you hit S and Y, you can scale this down, and in a moment here I'm going to go in, wait, no. Now if you hold down control, you get finer control over how much it moves based on grid patterns. It's basically snapping along a certain series of points, and that looks pretty good right there. And we got a pretty good blade going on. Not too bad. This is a very, very low poly, very useful for like low poly games, for people who are just starting out in the industry kind of thing. And now we're going to bring it up and get our actual blade length. And I'm just testing some scaling here. And going out of object mode, you can actually, what am I doing here? Oh, I'm scaling down the size of the blade just to bring it in line with that grid line there. And now I should, what am I talking about here? I don't even know what I'm talking about. Okay, now I'm using the box select tool to select the top of that, and we're going to bring it up by holding control, or I'm pressing G to grab, Z to grab only on the Z axis, holding control, and I'm bringing it up. We're going to bring it up to the very top, I believe. All the way up there. There you go. So that's where we're doing that. And then let's see, where am I about to go now? What am I talking about? I don't even know. Okay, so we've got our blade length. I'm going to turn on the limit view so that when I'm in this view here, I don't see everything behind it. We're going to get rid of this face here and in a different kind of way. We're going to split it up a little bit. And in order to do that, we're going to use a tool called the knife tool by pressing K. As you can see here, it's got this little green square that follows along the edges. It's pretty neat, but if you bring it up to a vertice, it'll also go along the faces. You bring it up to a vertice, you'll see this little red box, and that's snapping to the vertice, which is very useful. Click on the next vertice and then press enter, and it now slices that face in half. And we're going to do it one more time over here to here. Oh, come back here. There it is. And hit enter again, and now we have a vertice in the middle. So what this will allow us to do is it will give us our point, our sword point, our blade point. Bring it out, and then I'm going to start holding control here in a second. There we go, and bring it to that line there. Got a nice point. Not bad. It'll work. And yeah, very nice looking little low poly blade. And if you want to make it longer, you can just select those top vertices and drag it up to as long as you want. And yeah, not bad. Now we're going to be making our cross guard. What am I doing? Come on, get to the cross guard. Yes, here we go, cross guard down here. Now in order to do this, let's get our camera centered a little bit. There we go. Shift A, mesh. We're going to get another cube. This just adds it right in the center. I'm going to go ahead and leave the origin point in the center for right now. Go into edit mode with tab, S, X, holding control, scale it out. I'm trying to figure out about how much I want to scale it. About right there for right now, I think. And scale it on the Z to bring it, to thin it out a little bit to about halfway between each of the two boxes. And then if we rotate our view, you can see that it's still pretty thick, and we don't really want that. So back into edit mode, S, Y, holding control, bring it in until it looks good. About right there. That looks pretty good. All right, so there's a very basic cross guard, not bad. So let's see, what do we want to do now? I believe what I'm trying to figure out. Oh yes, I wanted to delete a face on the blade here, and to be able to hide everything else, you can just hit the slash on your numpad, and that hides everything else except for the object that you have selected. And if you go into face select mode like I just showed, select the face, hit X, and faces. We get rid of that one. That'll be useful later for when we're doing UV mapping and things, which is going to be coming up in another video. This one is just about getting the basic shape of our object. Numpad 1 to go in the front view, numpad slash to unhide everything. And we're going to, if you ever bring your 3D cursor, which is that crosshair looking thing with the ring, all you got to do is if it goes like way out there or something, hit Shift S and cursor to center. There you go. It's right back where it should be. Selecting the cross guard, now we're going to create some edge loops on this to be able to get ourselves a little bit more geometry to work with. Back into vertex select mode, Control R, you can see this pinkish purple loop here. It's going to split it right down the middle of the geometry. We want it on this edge. Go ahead and left click once and then right click to center it. And that's very useful. Numpad 7 to go in the top view. And if you were to do it on the other axis, you can do more loop cuts by, let's see, Control R again for the center. And then if you scroll wheel up, you can do even more loop cuts. You can do like pretty much as many as you want. If you right click though, it cancels it. So that's what we're going to do. Now we just want to bring these two sides out here. Let's see. What am I talking about? Gosh. Yes, we're going to bring these two sides out a little bit, get it a little bit more pointed, make it look a little bit better. The flat look is not that great. S, X, and we can scale it outward to about right there. Now things are looking a bit large. So we're going to go ahead and select everything, S, X, and then hold Control, bring it in to about right there. That's not too bad. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Alright. So let's see. Now we need to get our handle. What am I talking about? Sorry, this is the first time in a long time I've done dub commentary on a tutorial. I don't think I've ever done dub commentary on a tutorial. Over here is the outliner. This is showing you everything that's in the scene. And you can see that we have two cube objects, and a cube.001 is the second one. That's the guard. Let's go ahead and just double click and rename it to guard. And we're going to select the cube and rename it to blade, just to make things a little easier for us to remember and understand. Alright, now we need to get our handle so that we have something to hold on to. Now we're going to go back in the front view, and we're going to grab both of these objects here, and we're just going to GZ, and we're going to bring it up, holding Control, and I had to hold Shift for this. You may have varying results, but we just want to line it up with that baseline, just so that we have an easy spot for the handle to line up with. So, and you can see that the origin of the cross guard is still in the center of the object. So, Shift A, mesh cylinder, and over here you can see we have a whole bunch of vertices, 32. We're going to go ahead and bring that down until it looks good for our low poly weapon. And I believe I brought it down to 6 originally, but I believe 8 looked a little bit better. Yes, that's what I ended up going with. And then I'm going to show you a neat little trick here for being able to bring down the center of the, or to bring the origin back up to the top. So I got it in line with the base, and everything is looking pretty good. But the origin point is still in the center of this object, but we're going to be scaling it. So we want that origin up at the 3D cursor. So if your 3D cursor is already where you want the origin point, then the simplest thing to do is to just come over here to set origin and then to 3D cursor. And there you go. It's right at the top. I'll show you another way to move your origin point a little bit later on once we get to the pommel. Now, pressing S for or going into the top view with numpad 7. You see that this handle is huge, so we're going to press S, holding Control, bring it down until we can't see the handle anymore, like so. And that still looks kind of flimsy. This is really tiny. How are you going to hold on to that thing? So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to scale it up a little bit more. And I'm not holding Control this time. I'm just bringing it up until I find that it looks good, and that looks good to me. So at this point, I am going to bring the origin point of this object down to this cursor as well. And I'm going to scale it down a little bit because it's kind of thick. To about there. That looks good. Yeah, not bad. Alright, go back into our handle. We're going to scale this up, holding Control again, till we have a decent sized thing here. And that actually looks pretty good. That was pretty good for having the object go off of the edge. Although I am going to try and scale it down here a little bit. Once again, I'm doing this pretty much all one-handed, so it's a little bit finicky for me to get that. Oh, there. There we go. Just wanted it in line with that one. And you can see here that the handle is about a third of the length of the blade. That's kind of important. You want your handle to be a proportional length of the blade. Just because of balance, it's very important to have a handle that can counterweight the weight of the blade. And about a third is usually a pretty good reference. A lot of times it just comes down to what looks good for you. So at this point, we're going to add in another cylinder. And this time we're going to bring the vertices down to 6. This is going to be our pommel. Now to change the origin on this one, I'm going to show you a handy little trick. And I'm going to select this object, go into edit mode, and I'm going to hit that numpad slash again to hide everything but this object. Now select all of the vertices on that top face. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit Shift S, and we're going to do cursor to selected. And that brought our little crosshair cursor thing up to the middle of that face, right in the center. Out of object mode, set origin to 3D cursor. How about that? And that made it very easy for us to be able to move this object to where we need it, which we're going to do here in a second. We're going to, I'm just talking about how that's a handy way of moving your origin point around. Out of the hide mode, back into front view, and we're going to select the handle, and we're going to move the 3D cursor again using the exact same method, but we're not going to move the origin point this time. No, we're going to do something a little different. Move the cursor out of edit mode, select the pommel. This object's going to be the pommel. Shift S again, selection to cursor. You see that? It's now at the base of the handle. That is a very useful technique for being able to move an object to a very specified point, is using the origin point to move it around. Now S and Z, holding Control to scale this object down until we get it to about the right thickness, and that's pretty good for a first try. And now it's a little bit thick, or a little bit too wide at the base, so we're going to go ahead and just scale it on the X first. Bring that down to right about there. Looks pretty decent. And now S and Y to scale this part down. And about there. Looks pretty good. And the X is still a little bit large, so we're going to go ahead and bring it down 1 point. There we go. Now everything should be pretty a-okay. Alright, now we're going to need to add a little bit more detail to this. So what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to go select everything, go to mesh. Oh, I just realized I hadn't talked about what I was doing here. Select everything with A, click mesh, faces, and we're going to do triangulate faces. This is very handy for game makers because it allows you to have a much more optimized model for game development. Game engines tend to use tris over quads, and what that means is it uses triangles rather than squares or rectangles. So I was looking at both of the faces and they both look kind of wonky, so I'm going to go to tris the quads, and that's a little bit better. At least they both have the same basic shape on the top and the bottom now. They got that kind of arrow, but they are reversed. So what I'm going to do something with faces here, and we're going to go into face select mode, select both of these faces here, press X and faces. We got rid of those. Now we're going to go back into vertex select, select these three over here, and press F, and we have a face. And we're going to repeat that process, but this time we're going to select 4 vertices, and we're going to press F again, make a new face, and we're going to repeat that on the bottom. That gives us a very nice geometry to work with, much more symmetrical, and we're going to repeat the process down here. And in order to do that, we have to select both of the faces, X, faces, and we're basically just matching the top now. I just accidentally moved my cursor, so we're going to put that back at center. Select these faces here, F, or I'm sorry, vertices, select the vertices. Select these points here, and F, and now we have a symmetrical geometry, which is very handy to have. Now, it's usually a pretty good idea to try and keep your meshes as symmetrical as possible, just for when you get into the UV editing and texturing and stuff like that. And we'll get to that in the next video. So now here I hit E after selecting those faces, held Control Shift and brought it up, and now I'm just scaling it in just a little bit to give it a little bit more detail. I'm going to repeat that down here. So E, holding Control and Shift, bring it out 1, and this time we're going to scale it in a little bit further to about right there. That looks pretty good. And now we got our pommel design. It looks pretty decent. Now if I were to redo this entire video, which I was tempted to do instead of dubbing in the commentary, however I had this really nice footage already, so I figured why not. I'm scaling down the pommel here to fit the shape of the sword handle a little bit more. I figured why not just dub in the commentary? But if I was going to do it differently for the handle, instead of using 8 vertices, I would have gone to 6, the same as the pommel, just to keep things looking the same. And now here I'm just renaming things so that everything is organized, makes sense. And that's pretty much it. We got a nice little simple low poly. This could be either a short sword or a dagger, depending on the kind of character holding the dang thing. And then, yeah, so in the next video, guys, we're going to be going over UV mapping. We're going to set up seams and try and get our textures, our UVs set up for texturing. And we might even get into some basics on texture painting. That's something that I've been wanting to get into, but until we get to that video, we will see. See you guys later, guys. I hope you found this video enjoyable and helpful. So let me know, guys. Thank you for watching. Bye.